Good evening. I'm Kalamazoo City Deputy Manager Jeff Chamberlain, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Kalamazoo City Commission for the Committee of the Whole on Monday, May 17th, 2021. Tonight's meeting is being streamed live on the City of Kalamazoo's Facebook page, as well as the City of Kalamazoo's YouTube channel. You can listen in on tonight's meeting by calling area code 269-552-6425 and entering meeting ID number 95906979466 when prompted. And you can also leave a public comment tonight by calling area code 269-226-6573. And I'd like to turn it over to Mayor David Anderson.
Thank you, DCM Chamberlain, the voice of the City Commission for the last 13 months. Appreciate it. So nice to see everybody's faces. It's good to see you this beautiful evening. Calling this Committee of the Whole for Monday, May 17th to order. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Cunningham. Commissioner Hess.
Present in the City of Kalamazoo.
Commissioner Knott.
Here, Kalamazoo.
Commissioner Pradle.
Present in the City of Kalamazoo.
Commissioner Urban.
Here in Kalamazoo.
Vice Mayor Griffin.
Here in the City of Kalamazoo.
Mayor Anderson.
Here in the City of Kalamazoo. May I have a motion to excuse Commissioner Cunningham?
So moved.
Support.
Made by Commissioner Pradle. I missed the
Second.
support. Supported by Commissioner Urban. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Cunningham is excused. City Manager Ritzma, any communications?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Thank you so much. And DCM Chamberlain, do we have public comments?
Yes, sir, we do. We have a couple of public comments, and we'll begin with those now.
Good evening. My name is Denise Keel. I live in Kalamazoo Township, and I'm calling on the Inclusive Election Services, the expanding of participation, registration, and access that the City of Kalamazoo implemented this last year. As many of you know, I'm the faculty co-chair for an organization called We Vote, the nonpartisan Get Out the Vote organization at Western Michigan University. I first just have immense respect and appreciation that I want to share in the work that our clerk's office has done over the many, many years with Western Michigan University, and in particular the last few years in my role there. They've always worked with us so well on the many user challenges, like proof of residency, for example, and we so appreciate their hard work and their willingness to meet with us to improve student voting. There are a lot of barriers to students to vote, time, access, knowledge, even stamps. I cannot say enough about the paid postage that was part of the expanded voting registration and access. That absolutely impacted our community of students. And mostly I would like to say, please, please, please continue the satellite clerk's office. There are so many voters that in prior elections, I would have had to turn away because they show up to the Bernhard Center where the precinct is on election day, but they weren't registered. They were registered in Detroit, and they wouldn't have been able to get a ballot home or drive home that day. To be able to say, all you need to do is do all of that and one-stop shop with the satellite clerk's office was a really amazing experience that the City of Kalamazoo and our clerks made possible. Please, please, please keep that. And if you're thinking of...
Hi, my name is Wendy Fields. I'm a resident of Kalamazoo City, and I'm just calling to give feedback in regards to the 2020 elections. I thought the new options that were offered, the voting boxes, the satellite site, free postage, all of that was A+, and I think that those efforts and those options made it easier for voters to vote as a whole. I hope that it continues here going forward. The other thing that I would like to make note of is that the ballot box on the east side, I think on Charlotte, I think it should be moved to a more visible location. It wasn't a very visible location. And I think that it should be moved to somewhere like Harding's or the library over there, or the new youth center, or even the fire department over there. So, but overall, I think that was great. The other thing that I would encourage and suggest is that there is signage during the voting days put around the polling places that clearly designate the distances from the door of the polling location to where campaigners, petitioners, those collecting signatures should be. Because what we did notice, I worked the polls, and so what we did, the people would encroach up to the door, blocking some voters, and so we had to ask several times that they move back. So signage would be good. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Mayor, that was the last public comment.
Thank you, DCM Chamberlain. So, Manager Ritzma, are you going to be going over upcoming items for our City Commission agenda?
I'll have Deputy City Manager Jeff Chamberlain cover those, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, this is Deputy City Manager Jeff Chamberlain. And just real briefly, for your meeting tonight at 7 o'clock, at your regular business meeting, we do have 3 proclamations at the beginning of the meeting. Under the consent agenda, there's a number of purchasing items, as well as a first reading on a revision to the ordinance regarding pawnbrokers, to bring that in consistency with the state of Michigan ordinances. And then on our regular agenda tonight, we have a recommendation from the Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo Committee, the work that they've done regarding their budget and funding recommendations. And that is coming tonight for recommended action. And then on June 7th at the Committee of the Whole meeting, we intend to bring to the City Commission some ideas and the information that we've been gathering so far regarding the new federal stimulus program that's just now being rolled out to communities and counties and states across the country. We are just now receiving guidance on that. And so we plan to share with you kind of what we've learned so far. Also just kind of what the process ahead looks like, and just kind of reemphasizing with the public that this will be a process, and that these funds are very important to our community. But at the same time, we have until the end of 2024 to allocate them. And in some of the categories, actually until 2026 to spend the funds. So more to come on that. And then at the business meeting on June 7th, too, again, we'll have a number of purchases and some easement requests that will be coming up that night also. So that is all.
Thank you, DCM Chamberlain. So for who will be kicking off our work session this evening? Is that going to be all on the clerk, Manager Ritzma? All right. Clerk Borling, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about some of the things that we did last year to show you some data and the results of that, and the impact that these added services, or what last year we called them enhanced services or added services, and the impact of those, and then kind of let you know what we're looking at in terms of moving forward. I do appreciate the comments that have been made with Wendy and Denise tonight, and I've also received comments via email, and we're going to continue that outreach because we want to see where we move forward with these services. And so let's go ahead and get into this. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. And okay, can people see my screen? Okay, good. So in terms of what I want to share tonight, here's the agenda. Just want to give a very brief overview of election administration in Michigan. give a little bit of an overview of the absentee voting process, because that was a really big thing last year. I want to talk about 2020 in review, just a high-level overview, give some statistics about our November election specifically, and then move on to talk about the enhanced voting services that that we were able to put in place, and end up with finish up with some next steps and some things that we're working on right now. So I'm not going to read this slide. I really just want to give the visual showing the fact that in Michigan, the way we run elections is really a cooperative affair between the state through the Secretary of State's office, at the county level through the county clerk, and then local clerks, which are city and township clerks. And we each have our role to play. We each play an important role, those of us involved in the process. But something I wanted to point out was that if you look at that far right column with the city and the township clerks, when it comes to voter services and customer service, it's the city and township clerks that are really directly interacting with voters the most, whether that's through the absentee voting process, voter registration, or on election day in the voting precincts.
Clerk Borley,
Yes.
would you be so kind as to explain what the QFV is?
Sure. Sorry. Qualified, it's actually should be QVF. That's a misspelling.
Okay, I wonder.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So it should be QVF, and that stands for the Qualified Voter File. And the Qualified Voter File is the statewide voter registration database. And even that is a cooperative effort between the state, the county, and us local clerks. We all play a role. This system is connected to the Secretary of State branch offices that do transactions apologies for the typo there, but yes, the Qualified Voter File.
Okay. Thank you, Clerk Borley.
Okay. And right at the front here, I want to just kind of do this general overview of the absentee voting process, because I'm going to be talking about absentee voting quite a bit in the next few minutes. And I just wanted to communicate that this is it's an involved process. If you see there's multiple interactions between the voter and between the local clerk, and on the right-hand side there, all of those clerk actions are tracked through the Qualified Voter File. And so it's fairly labor intensive to do the absent voter process, to issue absentee ballots and tabulate them. And so
Clerk Borley,
you know, I'm here and here. There's a
we are losing you a little bit. You're in and out.
okay.
Not sure where you are. If you got a little bandwidth problem or not.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it any better now?
It's good right now.
Okay, sorry about that. So the absent voter process, like I said, it's labor intensive for us. And you know, when I talk about absentee voting in the next few minutes, just understand there's a team that's standing behind me that does this work and that does it very well. And so I just want to kind of give this overview right at the beginning here before we get into the rest of it. Okay, so right now I just want to give a high level overview of what our year kind of looked like. That it started last March 10th with the presidential primary, and that was the first election, federal or state election, that we ran under the new opportunities that Proposal 3, that constitutional amendment, gave us. And that night of the presidential primary is when the governor announced the first positive COVID-19 cases, which of course colored what we did for the rest of the year. And the thing that I just want to say about last year is that no election that we ran last year was like the one we had run just before it. Every single election was different. You see, the May 5th election, for the first time ever, we did an election that was essentially all vote by mail. There was only a couple of days where people could come to City Hall and interact with us in person. The statewide primary, we were operating for the first time with all of the work going into protecting voters at the precincts, making sure we had personal protective equipment and so on. And of course, the November election, presidential elections are always different from every other election. Just with the level of participation, involvement, interest, and the opportunities and issues that come with that. So that was kind of our year in review. And the things that we did differently in most cases were in response to COVID-19, in an effort to keep voters safe, to give voters confidence that they could interact with the process and still participate in a safe way. And of course, when you talk about, well, how do you encourage voting? What do you do when people can't gather in person? Well, one of the natural alternatives was the absentee ballot process, and how that, the different ways we're able to make that happen for people. And so that resulted in a high level of participation through absentee voting. And this next slide that I like to share shows what that meant for us. All the way on the left-hand side of this graph, the very first data point is from November 2008, and that was our previous high watermark with over 6,800 voters. We surpassed that 6,800 mark in May of last year and ended up having almost 7,800 in May, almost 9,800 in August, and over 21,000 absentee voters in November. So this, I guess the biggest word to describe what happened last year for us election administrators was a sea change. It was a sea change for us. Focusing in on the general election, on the presidential election, here's some data. And from this slide, I guess the things I would point out is the total turnout was about 57.5%. And then if you'll notice in yellow, it shows the percentages of voting in person and absentee. And you see that approximately 65% of voters cast their ballots through the absentee voting process, and compared to 35% in person. And we had never seen that before. Looking more at the absentee ballot process, the middle section there, those statistics, you'll see that one of the services we offered were the drop boxes, as you know, and we received back over 6,500 ballots through those drop boxes. So that was an opportunity that voters used quite a bit. And also, we had quite a few ballots returned in person. When you look at the ballots returned in person and then through the drop box, it's not quite half of the total, but it's almost there. In the bottom section, you see what it looked like for us in terms of in person. So for the whole election, we had almost 4,100 people voting in person with us in some way or form, either at City Hall or at the Bernhard Center at WMU. And what I found interesting was when you look at this and you look at, say, the timing, when are people interacting with us? That last 2 weeks, over 75% of the total number of people that interacted with us in person did that in the last 2 weeks, and over a quarter were in the last 3 days, meaning the Saturday, Monday, and election day. And we had 454 on election day that were coming. Those would have been people who would have registered to vote and gotten an absentee ballot on the same day. And so now I want to talk about those service enhancements and the different things that we did. And these were in the resolution that the City Commission passed back in September. We had the branch office at Western Michigan University. We had some expanded evening and weekend hours. As was mentioned, we put prepaid postage on the absentee ballot return envelopes, and we installed, over the course of the year, we installed 5 drop boxes. The one at City Hall was installed just before the May election, and then the other 4 were in place at the beginning of October. So I'm just going to go through each one of these now and talk a little bit more specifically with each of them. That branch office at Western Michigan University, I say October 5th here. It was actually in place by about October 1st. All the boxes were. I'm sorry, boxes. No, sorry. Got mixed up. Branch office, October 5th is when that branch office opened in the Bernhard Center, and it was open through election day. We synchronized the hours at City Hall and this branch office so that it would be easier to communicate, and there's just one set of hours to know. It wouldn't be as confusing for people. The design was to encourage student voting, but it was open to any City of Kalamazoo voter. And as you heard, it was very nice for the people who were volunteering and helping at the Bernhard Center on election day to be able to send students who weren't registered to vote in the city down to the Bernhard Center, and that allowed them to vote when maybe in the past they would not have been able to. And so you see the results there. Over that 4-week period, 900, almost 1,000 absentee ballots were issued to city voters. And a number of those were coupled with voter registration transactions. The majority were coupled with voter registration transactions. And we had about 268 voters there and this is the branch office on election day. And thank you to Commissioner Hess, who volunteered and helped us with crowd control and directing people to the right places, making sure they were in the right place, because there are also 2 polling locations that vote in the Bernhard Center on election day. So we had volunteers there directing people, making sure they're in the right place. Another interesting thing is you see that bottom number, 342 voters assisted, and these are largely from other jurisdictions. We did a lot of work giving students envelopes, stamps, showing them where the mailbox was so that they could send their absentee ballot application or their voter registration form to the clerk where they lived. And so, in addition to the city voters that were served, there's quite a bit of help given to anyone who came by in order to help them vote. And when you chart, well, how did this work over time? We had hoped by opening this branch office in early October that it might help with the last minute rush if people could go in and take care of their registration, take care of their absentee voting ahead of time, that would maybe even out some of the crowd and spread it out over time. Well, you can see that didn't really work, and those first couple 3 weeks, like if you look at the left half of that graph, it almost doesn't even register that there was any activity going on. And then you look at the last 2 weeks and especially the last few days, and it just skyrocketed. And this is an example of why we are wanting to get feedback from voters right now, from residents, because the data doesn't always tell the whole story. And in this case, when I look at this graph, if I say, man, maybe we should only have that satellite location open, maybe the week before the election. But, number one, the population on campus was way down because of COVID-19. And there was not nearly the foot traffic through the Bernhard Center that compared to what you would normally get. Word of mouth communication was down. And then the other thing from our perspective in the clerk's office, we had a manager of a very skilled person managing that location, but we had temporary employees, temporary staff that we brought in, and they received training on the qualified voter file and how to register voters and issue absentee ballots. But what we found is that those first 2 weeks of the month were really important for getting those workers trained in a live environment and actually using it. So this is a case where you look at the data and it might suggest one thing, but then there's other information that it provides more context and it might lead to a different conclusion. So the second service that we offered were evening and weekend hours. We offered 2 evenings on October 19th and 27th, and then we added an extra Saturday. So the Constitution requires that we be open to the public 8 hours on the weekend prior to the election, and that can be either all on Saturday, all on Sunday, split between the 2 days, but we have to offer 8 hours of open hours to the community at the clerk's office. We added the Saturday before that, so now we had 2 Saturdays and 2 evenings. The results, 587 absentee ballots were issued during that time. 61 people registered to vote. When you look at just those extra hours, so that extra Saturday, the 2 evenings, 166 absentee ballots and 37 voter registrations. And the next slide is a chart that kind of shows that there's a lot of numbers there. But the 2 things that struck me were the highlighted numbers. Looking at that, the evenings, not as much going on, not as much traffic. The weekends definitely were where we got a lot of foot traffic in and a lot of voters coming in. And so that's something we might be looking at is, it might be better to add some more weekend hours because that seemed to be what people, what helped people the most. The postage paid absentee ballot return envelopes. Every absentee ballot that we sent out on the return envelope, there was, we put a stamp on there. If people came into the office in person, we would ask them if they were going to vote their ballot in the office and leave it with us. If so, then we grabbed an envelope that didn't have postage, so we weren't doing that. This service, it's interesting. It's gotten some mixed reviews. Some people are very enthusiastic about it, saying, thank you so much. This really helped. It made absentee voting simple. You vote your ballot, put it in the envelope, and stick it in the mail. And it's so easy. Thank you so much. We had other voters who came and brought their ballots back in person who were a little upset and saying, well, why are you wasting money like this, putting these stamps on when people will return them through the drop box, they'll bring them back in person and so on. But as you saw, I mean, there's still a significant number, 11,000 plus, that return their ballots through the mail. So This is one that, I mean, we do think we have continued it this year. We did it for the May election. We're planning on doing it for the November election. It's just one of those things that's it's a barrier that you take away from people. Ballot drop boxes. So the drop boxes were open by October 1st. And all 5 of them, like I said, the City Hall drop box actually opened a couple weeks before the May election. But the 4 other locations were open by October 1st. And those locations, they're City Hall, Patterson, right outside the Douglas Community Center, Oakwood at Public Safety Station number 7, Stockbridge, right outside the city's Stockbridge facility, and then no, it's not there, but the Eastside Community Center that was mentioned. And these boxes were serviced daily, 7 days a week. Someone came in over the weekend and checked them. We didn't want 24 hours going by without someone having their eyes on them and emptying them. Both for security and just to make sure to give people that confidence. These drop boxes had and have surveillance cameras on them, and so there's security provided that way. And the results, over 6,500 ballots returned through these drop boxes. And so that was a good option, alternative. As you can see, and with most of these services, a lot of them are trying to provide different avenues, different ways for people to vote absentee, to either get an absentee ballot or return it. And so drop boxes were an important part of that. This is kind of a breakdown of those drop boxes and how did they get used. And that big kind of aqua colored section, that is the City Hall drop box. Roughly 78% of the ballots that came back through the drop box came back through the City Hall drop box. The City Hall drop box is both a walk-up and a drive-through drop box. And the other boxes are not. They are facing away from the road. You have to walk up to them. The second largest, what looks like a tan color there, that is the Oakwood drop box. So for us, the question with the drop boxes, it's not a yes or no question. Should we have them? Shouldn't we? The thing that we're trying to find out now is if these are placed in the best, in the most effective locations. Are they accessible? You heard Ms. Fields talk about the East Side drop box. That's the kind of feedback we want to hear is, if people don't think that a Dropbox locations is particularly effective, then we want to consider, do we need to move it and put it someplace else that's easier to see, more easily used, etc. So now when we start looking forward, we had these we had these enhanced voting services last year. And, as we look forward, we want to make sure that we're inclusive in how we offer our services. We want to make sure that that the services we offer are effective, that people find them useful. And so that's why we're seeking this community engagement. And so, beyond this meeting, we're going to be trying to do some more engagement with groups in the community to hear back from them, because we want to combine this, this feedback that we get from voters along with the data that we have, so that we can come back with a report and recommendations with cost estimates. What we're getting at is we want to have a plan going forward as to what services we're going to offer, and move from calling these things enhanced services to just incorporating them into what we do. so in addition to that work that we'll be doing over the next month or so, a month or two, some additional things we're working on right now. We're implementing a new poll worker database. I know that's not too exciting for people. For us, it is. It'll enable us to communicate better with our poll workers and manage that important piece of the mix. Manage that in a better way. We have the November 2021 municipal election coming up, and I can announce that our candidate packets are now available. Those were available starting today, and someone who wants to run for mayor or city commissioner needs to come down to the city clerk's office and pick up one of those packets. It has the forms that you need and instructions that go along with that. Also coming up, we'll be working on finding some new polling locations. There are a handful of our voting precincts that we need to find some new polling locations for. So we'll be working on that. And then at some point, and I mean, it's under the heading 2020 projects, but it's really, I don't know when this is going to happen, and that is a precinct boundary review. And this is a normal activity to do after the US Census and after the state does its work at redistricting and redrawing legislative districts, and then the county does its work with the county level legislative districts. And then we look at what those new lines are and see if we need to adjust our precinct boundaries, because we try to avoid having what we call split precincts, where you have a precinct that has multiple legislative districts in it. Then you have to have different ballots for those voters and so on. So that's something that we'll end up doing. It's a normal, like I said, a normal activity after the US Census and redistricting happens. So those are where we're heading with this, with our enhanced voting services and some of the other projects that we're working on. And again, we welcome more feedback from people to help us hone and make our services more effective. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Clerk Borling, for a very helpful presentation. I want to ask you a quick question before I open it up here. Are there any date changes? Is there a consolidation that occurred relative to the dates that you can hold elections in Michigan?
Not that I'm aware of. I know there's a bill out there that would consolidate the May and August elections into a June election. To my knowledge, that hasn't passed yet, okay. But I can check on that. In terms of the November dates, that's all, that hasn't changed.
Okay, so for this year, we still have the same prescribed dates where elections can be held then?
Correct.
Right. Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Pradel.
Scott, you mentioned about the precinct locations that you may have to find alternative sites. What would that be effective this coming November election?
Yes, we'll be looking to find new locations that would be in use for the November election. And
is that about, can you remind me again how many locations approximately that is? I think it's like 7 or so.
I think it's actually 5, if I remember correctly. I think it's 5.
Great. And that's largely just due to like new public school rules about polling locations at schools, if I understand.
Yeah. So here in West Michigan and in Kalamazoo County specifically, there's been a trend for the schools to ask local clerks to move voting precincts out of the schools, largely for security reasons, which we can understand. And so this is something that other clerks have had to deal with, and that now we're looking to find new polling locations for those precincts that are currently in schools.
And so if those changes are made, usually those would be in place before fall or whatnot, so people would know where to find those
Er,
locations?
Correct. That is something that comes before the city commission. The local governing body establishes the polling locations, and that has to be done at least 60 days prior to the election. And the standard operating procedures to send new voter identification cards to all those voters who are affected. We post for a few elections, of course, starting in November, and for a few elections after that, we'd post signage at the old polling locations, directing them to the new polling locations. We do everything we can to make sure people know about it.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
We actually, one of the things we dislike doing the most is moving people around. I mean, we don't like moving people because voting habits are really ingrained. It takes a while for people to learn new voting habits, and that's partially because you go a relatively long period of time between voting events. So, yeah.
See any other questions at this point. So I just wanted to say once again, from all of us, Clerk Borling, I really, really appreciate your focus on access to voting and being clear about it. Obviously, we have to work within the parameters that state law allows, but within that, I feel like we're doing everything we can here in Kalamazoo to make sure that people can vote, which is so important. So thank you for your work. I really, really appreciate that. Are there anything else from you, Clerk Borling, or is that?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioner comments for the committee of the whole meeting? I don't see any. I know that there are, as DCM Chamberlain mentioned, we have 3 proclamations on our business meeting agenda tonight. So please let me know, individuals who would like to read those, and make sure you either have it up or print yourself a copy before our meeting at 7. Anything else for the good of the order, Manager Risma?
We're all set, Your Honor.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you so much. See you in a little bit. We are adjourned.